Hello and welcome to another episode of the Self-Made Podcast. On this episode, I get my good friend Ajay Patel on the show to talk everything about fitness. He has a really interesting backstory. Coming from the finance industry, it really does give him an extra level of empathy that what most of his clients are going through. And that's sort of where we focus most of this episode. We talk about his transition from finance to fitness, how he changed from a very, very secure income to a very much more risky, unstable career and followed his passion in fitness. How he used this and studied as a side hustle and really put all the effort into making it work. We then speak about some of the issues that he finds his clients face, from managing social occasions to the relationship with saying no and people pleasing to time management and just the judgmental looks of self-sabotage from friends and co-workers. This is a really good episode if you want to learn how to get in shape from someone that's seen both sides of the coin. He's seen where you are, he's seen where you struggle, and he's worked on those things with many, many clients. We also start the episode off speaking about the differences between one-to-one and online coaching and why he's decided to stay very proudly a one-to-one personal trainer over the booming online market. And we speak about how most good online trainers should have done a period of time on the gym floor, honing the craft and getting better and better on the gym floor so they have a better appreciation for what their clients are going through and can help them through issues you just cannot get from studying on a laptop. This is a really, really interesting conversation. Ajay's been one of my friends for many, many years, and it's definitely always a fun chance to chat to him. So please go follow him on his socials, show in the show notes. And if you enjoy the show, please share on social media, tagging me and Ajay. Go on to our support me, buy me a coffee link if you want to support the show, and also leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcast from. So without further ado, I'll leave you myself and Ajay. So Ajay, I think this will be a fun episode because how long have I known you now? Like met in London and then happened to both move to Hong Kong. It's like one of those small world instances. Like how long have I known you? Do you know?
Well, we would have been working indirectly together since 2016. That's when I started.
Yeah. I remember one of the first.
I met you before that because I came to a boot camp workshop thing that they were running.
Oh yeah.
I
remember. I first one time I remember properly getting to know you was that Muscle Nerd seminar, where everyone went for lunch and you got a Nick Daniels special, like backed into the corner, ranting about something, probably very good, but I don't think you got any lunch that day.
Nah, I remember that. Yeah. So that was when I just started working there as well.
Yeah. So for people who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what you do?
So I would say I am predominantly a gym floor personal trainer. I feel like they're dying out a little bit as everyone moves online. But I'm a gym floor personal trainer. I do a little bit of online work. I've been a personal trainer since 2013, so 9 years. Although the first couple of years more part-time. But yeah, my background, interestingly, is actually finance. So I transitioned into personal training 9 years ago. And probably since 7 years ago, not looked back. First couple of years were a bit rough finding your feet, as it can be.
So there's a couple of things to unpack there. I first want to unpack the gym floor PT because you made a very big key point in that. And I think it's interesting because there's the trend now for coaches to go straight into PT qualification, straight onto online coaching, which I personally think is a little bit of a mistake. Like, why is it that you are still very adamantly a gym floor coach? Why have you made that choice where everyone's gone, well, zigged, you zagged?
I love the in-person interaction. Especially when COVID first started and gyms first closed in Hong Kong. And I think personal trainers all around the world were in a bit of a panic, like our work has been taken away from us. So what do we do? Everyone was looking to move online, including me. And I started a bit of that while I wasn't really training anyone in person. But for me, is you can't replace, I think, especially as you said, a lot of trainers are just getting the qualification and then moving straight into being like an online coach, which, I mean, the fact that we're even able to do that, it's, a bit sketchy, I think. But you can't replace that in-person gym floor experience from training someone in person. compared to just like, you know, being a keyboard coach without really having that background and like experience in person.
I totally agree with that. And I think when you're looking at the keyboard coach is an interesting thing, because I think there's two kinds of online personal trainer that people go online. It's the people that have done the decade or plus in I hate to say in the trenches, but like on the gym floor.
No, you're right, in the trenches. Exactly.
Yeah, and like on the gym floor, seeing stuff. So when a client goes, my knee hurts during a split squat,
yeah,
it's not a textbook answer. What does Wikipedia say about this? Or, you know, it's not 10 calories a pound, and when they stop moving, I do this, then I do this, then I do this. There's nuance in there, and we can understand the layers that are deeper that you sort of don't get from just going, you know, doing online courses and typing a check-in.
100%. Like if I've got an online client that says, you know, like I've got this injury in the past, and you know, I've never really done any weight training because it always hurts, or blah blah blah. It could be something with their knee, their hip, the lower back, whatever it is. I can visualize it better because of the gym floor experience, not just the gym experience of training myself, but also the gym experience of training people in person. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're a personal trainer that's just got a qualification, hopefully you have a qualification, a lot don't, I think, and you've just gone straight into online coaching, the only real experience you have is training yourself and maybe, I don't know, training your mate. But actually taking someone who, you know, probably has like no training experience, you know, doesn't really know what they're doing. That's the demographic I take. It's different if you're training like other trainers or more experienced trainees. But yeah, you can't replace that experience you get in person from training someone on the gym floor, from like ground zero, from like, square one.
That's another point, isn't it? When we look at people that aren't qualified, like we're using the comparison of someone that's had the qualifications that may try and individualize the program, just haven't got the experience now to do it truly well. But we see this, I say only industry in the world where someone that could be on Made in Chelsea and can say just do the same as what we do without a qualification. It could sell a diet plan or a training program purely based off their following. Whereas you don't get that, like, if I want to go to a dentist, I don't go, well, I'm not going to go to my dentist. I'm going to go to some person from Geordie Shore, you know, or open heart surgery. You know, it's a weird industry where, trainers are fighting an uphill battle as it is online. And I think even from a marketing perspective, having the years on the gym floor to do a better job sets you apart. Otherwise, you're just fighting a battle against people with bigger followings than you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing of, if you think about the industry as a whole, and like, I mean, from before I was even a personal trainer, thinking of the things that people might go to in terms of like getting into fitness, you get like celebrities that come out with fitness DVDs. You know, you could be a TV presenter or an actress or an actor, and just because you got in shape maybe for a job that you've got, and people are always going to be like, what diet did they do? What training programs did they do? And then come out with the DVD. Like, I think you said Made in Chelsea or one of the TOWIE people probably have a DVD of their own. Yeah, it's so easy to put one of those out there.
Do you think like it's, that's gotten worse over the course of lockdown, where online personal trainers become more empowering? Like, if we look at what grinds your gears, to steal a Family Guy quote, in terms of fitness marketing, this could be during the last 2 years or in general. What are the things that you think that really you'd like to put the record straight if you could?
I don't think that's a tough one. I don't think there's one pocket of people. We were talking about like personal trainers that have just got a qualification and go straight into being an online coach, or like celebrities that come out with fitness DVDs. I don't think there's one pocket of people that try and capitalize on that specific thing in the fitness industry. I think it comes from so many different angles. And ultimately it's loads of different groups, whether it's like a supplement company or a clothing line, or I don't know, someone trying to sell a fitness DVD. Everyone's always trying to capitalize on people who are desperate. Yeah. Really, right? So that's why, now in probably most major cities in the world, you have what we call now transformation gyms, right? One we used to work for, it's probably the big one that started that about 10 years ago. But it's all about oh, like do this 6-week transformation, 12-week transformation, like this whole short-term thing. Or if it's like a diet, like do this 30-day diet or the 60-day diet. It's always like some sort of short-term fix, promising the most amazing results, results that people have wanted for years. And whatever's trying to be sold or marketed, they're trying to promise you those results in the space of like 30 days or 90 days, whatever it is. And obviously desperate people buy into it because everyone wants results yesterday. So one of the big things, and I think I would say that I could relate to that from maybe when I got into training, when I first started training about 10 years ago. Something I sometimes tell my clients is I can always remember, like I said, my background was finance before I was a personal trainer. I remember, I think it was probably like 2011, working my first ever finance job and literally Googling Brad Pitt diet for Snatch, Brad Pitt diet for Troy. Because remember in Snatch, super lean, but he was quite skinny, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then he got a little bit bigger for Troy. I was like, Brad Pitt diet for Troy, Brad Pitt workout for Troy, Brad Pitt and Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds, I don't know if you remember the movie Van Wilder.
Yeah.
He was like, skinny dude. And then he obviously put on a bit of muscle for Blade 3.
Yeah, Blade Trinity, right? Yeah.
Blade Trinity. Ryan Reynolds diet for Blade Trinity. I remember being that person, and like probably one of the big things I think probably a lot of personal trainers lack in the gym floor, PT, maybe even online coaching industry is empathy, right? Being able to put yourself in the shoes of a client, right? Like what are the things, like trying to put yourself in the shoes of a client, what are the things that they have maybe tried in the past and failed with in their pursuit of getting in shape, whatever point that they're starting at, but also why, right? For me, back like I said, in 2011, or even still now, like growing up, I've always been a skinny kid, right? So my whole thing was being, I would say, insecure about being skinny and wanting to, get bigger to, at a time when I was single, attract girls, look good in front of people on holiday, on a beach, whatever it is, right? And, being a little bit desperate. Everyone wants results, like I said yesterday. So what's the quickest way I'm going to get from where I am now to, where I want to be, the dream physique?
Yeah.
What was that Ryan Reynolds diet that he did to get from Van Wilder to Blade Trinity, or Brad Pitt diet to get from Snatch to Troy? So yeah, in this industry, things that grind my gears, to use that phrase, are just the overemphasis on short-term transformations. Like I would say, since I became a personal trainer, I would categorize myself as a trainer in the transformation industry. That's largely what I work on. Clients who want to get in shape in a time frame. But I think there needs to be a lot more emphasis on the bigger picture and the long-term transition from a short-term goal to a long-term goal.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think it's not necessarily the problem with the short-term mindset, but it's the approach that a lot of people don't know what comes with the short-term approach. It's, I think, understanding, this goes back into the online versus in-person transition, is that thing of like, okay, it's proper expectation management, because a lot of people want the results yesterday but don't know what they're going to have to give up in their lives, and they feel, I did a post on this today, the word should, they feel they should be there, but then their actions don't match up with the words. And it's like, it's okay if you had the idea of being here when you want to look like Ryan Reynolds, but then you realize after knowing what goes into that, being here is fine. You're being healthy, you're looking after yourself. If you truly want to be there, that's cool. It's going to take X. But if you want to get to the Ryan Reynolds Blade Trinity, we can talk in a second about celebrity workouts and the thoughts of how possible some of these are. But if you want to get to this crazy mental health level of shredded, I'm totally okay with getting you there, as long as, A, it's going to take this much work, effort, and sacrifice, so we don't end up in this battle where I'm trying to get you to do something as a coach and you're just not doing it. I'd rather meet halfway and do less of a goal, or go all in and go together. And I think B, I think a lot of coaches don't really know the ramifications of that hardcore diet. They don't know, if I low carb someone for a year on 900 calories, what does that truly do to me? Both physically, like testosterone, thyroid, but also mentally. How many clients I've seen that are really mentally scarred by dieting because it feels them on this hamster wheel where they can't get on or they can't get off. I'll do what I did last time because that's what worked before. But obviously that didn't stay there. And I don't like the term sustainable, but there's no transition. People learn to week 12, but no one learns week 30.
Yeah, definitely the mental side of it, as you said, is massively important. And like you said, there's nothing wrong with the short-term focus as long as it's coupled with the long-term as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, mentally, how people relate or that relationship with food that gets mentioned sometimes.
Yeah.
Actually assessing that from the start and like helping someone to actually maybe improve it if they need to improve it, if they have if they have anxiety around food. Like telling someone to demonize certain food groups probably doesn't help them in the long term. Like, yes, they lose weight in the short term, but if all of the focus is on the short term and there's no sort of attention paid to transitioning into the long term, like, of course, they're going to lose the weight and then put it back on. And then they're going to jump back onto that diet, like, I don't know, 6 months time or in a year's time, but they're going to keep going around in circles because they don't know how to transition into the long term and how to, one of the words you said you want to get rid of is sustainability. Again, it's kind of like need a bit of context, right? Like, yes, in the short term, you're going to need to do some things that you're not going to sustain for the long-term period, right? Like tracking things, like educate yourself on food, be more accountable. But you're trying to build some sort of habits, not just with nutrition, but also with activity, trying to build some habits that you do want to sustain in the long term.
Yes.
And that's going to help you to transition from that short term to the long term.
Yeah, I agree with that. With my gripe with the word sustainability is when someone says it on day one, it immediately says to me, they're going in with this with a half foot in, half foot out approach. This is, I'm scared of failure, or I don't believe I can do this. So if I don't commit, I won't get there. And the thing I often have with it is like, what is sustainable to 140 kilo Steve who likes, drinking 5 nights a week and pizza on 3 or 4 nights a week? What's important to him now that he wants to sustain will be very different to 80 kilo Steve. So it's like you go in with this approach of like, I'm going to go all in on this. I'm going to put everything into this. I'm going to learn about my foods. I'm going to like make this a priority and make that big change. Because being in a diet, both physically, we've said already that it's not going to be for calorie deficit year round. It's not good for thyroid, not good for testosterone, not good for various things, not good to gain some muscle mass. But mentally, you get those people that don't commit and they end up in this position where not really lean enough to really get into a lifestyle based on a bulk. They're not. But they're also bored of dieting and they end up in this sort of I'm half on, but I can't really stick to it sort of mindset. I'd rather go, right, this is your phase, get X amount off, and then we can sort of find out by that point we can go to you at week 20 and go, hey, at the start you want to do this, this, and this, and that was your sustainable. What now, after having maybe sacrificed some of that to get here, what now do you miss? I was like, I do miss going out for a couple of drinks with the boys on Saturday. Cool, let's factor that back in, because now if you still feel like that, it's something that is important to you outside the gym. It's not life is more than chicken, broccoli, training. It's like, you still want that drink? Cool, we'll add it back in. But you may go, do you know what? I don't really care about the chocolate anymore that I was wanting. And on day one, you would have said, I need my chocolate every day. Yeah.
There's definitely times to like go hard and be more kind of all in. And you'd expect that to be at the start, right? You're not going to be like, oh, okay, let's keep those 5 drinks in a week.
Yeah.
Beginning.
I think it's important to define what all in means as well, right? Because when I look at the term all in with a client, it's like, give it all you got, communicate with me, really put your effort into this and get your return on your investment. But what all in to me doesn't mean is that you'll never make mistakes. You've got to stick to exactly this meal plan, otherwise you're a failure. And that's another problem with the all in mentality. It's like all in terms of give this a level of priority that requires to get a result, but not all in to the point where it has to be so regimented that it becomes really hard to keep going.
Yeah.
Another
side of that as well, actually, I was just going to mention, sometimes it always depends on the person, right? It's like context is important. But some people can kind of get to the point where if you go all in or if you go teetotal on something, it's kind of like what they call the white polar bear effect, right? If I tell you not to think about the white polar bear, what do you think about?
Yeah.
Right? So if I tell you, okay, don't eat chocolate at all, like don't even touch it, don't even sniff it, don't have, like, if there's something that someone might say, oh, I can't live without this, right? You can always find a way to factor it in, like
Yes.
in the right amount, not like half the diet, but
Yeah.
small amount, just so they're like, oh, okay, I can actually have this, and I can still progress with my goals. I can still lose weight.
That's really interesting. When I work with somebody, online or in person, but obviously online, I enforce this because I'm not with them to sit and go through it. Is I always make the diet based off what they said in the forms, like on paper, optimal, that I think is relatively easy to follow. But I'll always go, this is not the final diet. Like, I want to have a conversation with you, and you tell me, pick it apart, and tell me, don't like that, can't get that. Could we change this? Could I add this? And going back to that word should, I often find those people, you often get people to go, no, this is good. I can do this, because they feel they should be on a hardcore diet. It should be 100% clean. And then they'll struggle 2 to 3 weeks in because they kind of kept that inside, those questions of those foods they wanted, because they feel they had to out hustle it. And I should never have chocolate again if I want to get in shape. Whereas you get the clients that like actually go, hey, do you know what? I don't really like having a big meal for lunch. Could we change that and have some more for dinner? And I go, oh, okay, change that, put this in here. And those are the people that kind of end up going, okay, this is a breakthrough moment of, oh, I can have that. And at that moment, the diet's gonna be so much easier for them, because you've just opened their eyes to, it's not as hard as they were making it out in the first place.
Yeah.
Going into your finance background, I think that's very interesting, because it's something that most trainers come in, like that I speak to and I've met, generally have been trainers all their life. They did sport, they wanted to be trainers, they got into training early. And this is probably the reason why they lack empathy, right? They never had the early starts, other than personal training early starts. They never had, these crazy deadlines and work commitments and pressures that their clients would have faced. Like, first off, like, what was it that made you make the transition away from finance into personal training? And then how do you feel like, how does it give you an advantage with your clients? What have you learned from
them? So the decision to move from finance to fitness, I think initially came about from the same time when I was talking about Googling Ryan Reynolds and Brad Pitt. That was actually an internship I did as part of my economics degree at university. So that was my first experience working in the finance industry. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, right, whatever I decide to do career-wise, it's got to be something that I will be happy to do for the next 40 odd years, right? You're assuming you start working at 20 something, and then you retire in your 60s. And after a couple of months working in that finance job, I was a bit like, damn, I hate this job. I hate this day-to-day life of, this is in London, waking up stupid early to commute over an hour to get into central London, to stare at a screen, doing a shit job that you fucking hate, listening some nonce next to you, telling you to do these like crappy jobs, going through like spreadsheets about shit you don't give a damn about. And I was like, there is no way I could do this for the next 45 years, let alone the next year. And also at the same time, I remember, so I had a gym membership. I used to go to Nuffield in Wimbledon. And like I was getting into my own training. I used to do a lot of reading in my own time, like just on everything, training, nutrition. I used to actually read pretty much every single article on the Poliquin website.
Yeah, I remember those days.
When I should have been doing my economics dissertation, I was like, I would literally spend hours on hours just reading everything I could. And I was like that into it. Because I genuinely loved learning about the body and about training and nutrition and everything to help me with my own training. But just I had a genuine interest in it. I had a passion for it. And at some point I would have just realized, like, look, I hate this. I hate the idea of working in finance, but I've actually got a passion for fitness. And like, going to a gym and seeing like, oh, there are personal trainers here and like they work as personal trainers, I could do that. So that's kind of how the idea came about. And it was actually on my graduation day, graduating in economics, that I decided I'm going to sign up to do a personal training qualification. I did that for the next 4 months,
Yeah.
qualified, and then it's all about, well, how do I actually take this qualification and put it into action? But yeah, so that's how it just came about, from following your passion, right? That's it.
So like with that, because obviously there's probably tons of people that will listen to this, or there's certainly tons of people out there that maybe in a similar position, maybe not with fitness, but they don't like their job. They're in a position where they don't like where they're at, and they want to make a change from an office job to something, whether it's fitness or whatever else. But a lot of people don't have the confidence. Say, I can't do that because I've got X, Y, and Z commitments. So obviously it takes a lot of bravery, not only moving away from a job that I don't know in an entry level how lucrative it was, but potentially financially secure, financially lucrative, potentially at least in the future, to something that is potentially unstable, uncertain. So like, how did you muster up the confidence with that, and what would you advise people who maybe would be thinking of doing the same?
So I mean, at the time, I remember thinking to myself, oh, I wish I did my degree in sports science, because it would have helped me with. But then down the line, you did say, like, what have I learned from working in the finance industry, and how's that helped me maybe as a personal trainer? I'd say I worked in offices for about 2 years. So in that time, I typically worked like your normal 9 till 5:30 kind of hours. So I never did the stupid like long hours that some of our clients do, right? But I got to know the office environment. So probably one of the things that, you'll have heard this from clients about, people in the office bringing in snacks on a Friday, and there's all these cakes and biscuits and stuff around, and like how to deal with that. Well, I remember what that's like from being in an office, so I can kind of like relate to it, and I understand that when a client tells me that, I'm like, okay, I get what you mean. Like I get the culture. So maybe like that's not something that you can maybe empathize with if you haven't had that experience. That's one of like lots of different examples, right? But from what was the other bits of the question?
So we were talking about the empathy. Just going into that though, just before I do, like with the office donuts thing, do you how much do you think that is circumstantial, just part of general work culture, or how much what do you think the impact plays on maybe subconscious sabotage when someone's dieting? Because I always find when you hear a story of that, someone brings donuts into the office, the person that's dieting will nearly always get offered the donut first. And it makes people who are not dieting feel better about themselves. If, well, Ajay's dieting, we had the donut, I feel better about mine, even though I probably had 3 on the way here.
No, it's absolutely, like, there is definitely something to that. I don't know, I guess it's a psychology thing, right? The people who really want the donut, or the box of donuts that's been brought in, they'll offer it to the people who, seem to go to the gym or whatever it is, because then they feel better about, like, if that person has a donut, this healthy person who goes to the gym and like eats fucking chicken and broccoli and shit, then I can have one, and it makes me feel better. But it's funny how that works, because if you think about it, the person who goes to the gym and 90% of the time eats pretty well can afford a donut or 3. Like, nothing wrong with that. Like, every few weeks I'll have a pizza. Like, nothing wrong with that, right? But it's different if you're someone who doesn't exercise, who kind of eats like crap most days, and then there's no wonder you feel guilty about it, because you know that deep down I probably should rein it in a little bit, but I really want it.
There's also the awareness of it as well, right? That person who eats healthy, let's assume they've got the plan in place to doing things right. They probably have started to learn about foods and know how many calories is roughly in a donut, and can probably adjust. So it's like, in the grand context of everything that's there, like, I can fit whatever I like in. That freedom there is that, rather than that person going, I don't know why I'm not losing weight, and then it's the things they forget about. It's the office donuts, it's the snacks at the desk, and that's where the guilt comes with the donut is bad. No, the donut's not bad. It's like you have no awareness around the concept of how all of these things playing together.
That's where it starts. That's where you start getting into that whole relationship with food, right? People start demonizing the things that they really love eating, and the things that they probably know that they should probably eat a bit more of, like vegetables and protein and stuff like that. They look at it like, I know it's a healthy food, but it's it's not really me. Like, it's not something that I like eating, or it's not something that it's not cool to eat. Maybe, I don't know. I think I saw a meme on Instagram a few weeks ago about something about like, oh, if I'm eating like, if someone sees me eating like a plate of, you know, nutritious food, right? Like some potatoes and some vegetables and some meat on it, and people automatically assume you're on a diet.
Yes.
As opposed to it's just being the way you eat, right? Like, this is how I eat 80-90% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always things like things that are considered diet foods. I'm like, what makes something a diet food? Like, just because it's nutritionally dense, because it's clean, you know, like anything potentially could be a diet food. But it's weird that these things aren't considered normal, which again goes back into that point of that subconscious self-sabotage, because every time people inherently want to fit in, and every time they're reminded that what they're doing is unnormal, makes them then question what they're doing as should they be doing it.
So two things actually. One, just talking about this now, I just had a little flashback of when I used to take my meals into work when I worked in finance. So this is back in the days when I used to eat 5 meals a day. So I would have breakfast at home. I would take
for metabolism, right?
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, exactly. I would cook. I was the king of food prepping these days, right? Like, pretty much had no other life apart from food prepping, gym, and work. But I would cook my 3 meals to take to work the night before, take them to work, eat one at 10 o'clock, one at 1 o'clock, one at 4 o'clock, go to the gym at 6, and then eat my dinner after the gym, right? But obviously, me taking 3 meals to my office job and eating at those times, 2 of which are not normal eating times, right? Apart from the middle one, people would obviously like look at me and just be not necessarily judging, but just interested to know what I'm doing. Right? Just interested to know what am I eating and, you know, like, what am I following? And to be honest, it didn't really bother me because I knew people were interested, and people used to just come up to me and ask questions. And, you know, at this time, you know, like I said, when I first became a PT, the first 2 years was more part-time. This is when I was still actually working in an office. So people knew, you know, I was a qualified personal trainer, and, you know, obviously, like, they would see what I would eat. Like, it was exactly that. It was like some sort of carbs, some vegetables, and some meat. And I was just eating it 3 times in front of them in the office. So, yeah, people would just, I guess, wonder what am I doing? Wonder if they should be doing the same.
Interesting.
Right? Like, you know, people think, you know, eating 5, 6, 7 meals a day, again, stokes your metabolism, which it doesn't. At the time, it was just I was trying to put on some weight and I needed to really eat a lot of food, more than I could put in 3 meals. So there is a little bit of that. Like, then when other people see what I'm doing, or if other people see someone eating, you know, what we would call a healthy meal, they then wonder, like, oh, should I be doing that? And I've lost my train of thought again.
Yeah, but like, well, on that, like, it's interesting to know, like, it's talking about like almost excuse busting, but not from a position of lack of empathy. Because one of the things you'll often hear of people in financially is that I physically can't do X. I cannot eat at my desk. I cannot leave my desk to do my steps. How true, being in the industry, are those statements, or how much is it I would look odd, people would question me if I did it, so I'm just going to say not allowed to do it?
It always depends on the person, right? But it's exactly that. Like, sometimes when people say I can't do this and I can't do that, it is a fear of being judged by someone else, right? Like, you know, if it is a case of, oh, I'm in a meeting and, you know, it's a board meeting, I can't like be eating in front of certain people, right? Then of course you can't do that. But as you said, a lot of the time it could be that they're afraid of being judged by someone else. Like, if back when I was taking my 3 meals into work, like, if I was afraid of someone looking at me eating like chicken at 10 in the morning, then maybe like I wouldn't have done that. But obviously I didn't really give a damn. So I still did it. So there is a little bit of that. One thing actually I talk about with my clients when I kind of like start them off, especially in the beginning, one phrase I use a lot is putting yourself first.
Yeah.
So, and this is a huge thing for people. I mean, our demographic of clients, right? Like, for maybe for people who are, in fact, a good example of this being relevant is in social situations. And when people struggle to, cap the number of drinks they have on a night, or cap how much food they have in a social situation, a lot of the time it's them putting other people or other people's happiness above their own, right? Because I can think of a few clients where they've had this situation where someone's handed them a drink. And we've talked about the social situation, like the Friday night, and how to plan for it beforehand in the session. And, if normally, before they started with me, if normally like on night out, they'd have 5 to 10 drinks, I might say to them, depending on the person, right? Some people I might say, look, let's not just have any drinks. Or I might say to them, look, let's cap it at 2 or 3, right? Let's cap it at 3. And let's work on some strategies to help you to stick to 3, right? Like have a glass of water in between. Slow down with how quickly you drink the drink. If you're used to like necking them, of course you're going to go through them quicker, right? Say if you've had your 3rd one and someone hands you a 4th one, right? Deep down, okay, this person wants to lose weight. They know that 4th drink is not going to help them to lose weight, right? Extra 200 calories or so. But they're afraid of upsetting the other person who's offering them a drink. They're also probably a little bit afraid of sticking out like a sore thumb and, being awkward. There's a bit of both of those things, right? But if you're really and truly putting yourself first and putting what you really want first, what would actually genuinely make you happy, not just in that moment, but in the long term, right? Sure, a drink would make you happy in the moment, but then if you end up having regrets about it next day, that doesn't help. And then long term, you start feeling guilty about it. And that's where that starts to kick in, right? Whereas if someone turns down that 4th drink because they've agreed with themselves or with their coach or whatever, really with themselves, right? It shouldn't necessarily just come down to agreeing with the coach, but it's really an agreement they have with themselves to, okay, I'm going to cap it at 3 because, these are the goals I'm working on right now. And this is what I truly want. If I turn down that 4th drink, maybe I don't get that instant satisfaction that I get from having a drink, but I've already had 3, right? Yeah. But the next day, I'm not going to have any regrets.
Yeah.
And that's putting yourself first. And that's a really important part of this whole transformation process, not just transforming, not just a short-term thing of, losing your 10, 20, 30 kilos, but also then being able to manage those situations long-term and like still being able to enjoy occasions. Like I said, like have a few drinks, especially when you're past your weight loss phase and you're then maintaining, you can then up it maybe from 3 to 5. Just don't do it every day or like 3 times a week. Pick and choose your moments and know when to stop. Put yourself first. Like don't just have the extra drink, even though you don't really want it because you're already like bloated from beer, as I normally get. But like, don't just do it to make someone else happy. Put yourself first.
Yeah. I love that quote. If you saw me there, take a note down. I took note of that quote, and I think that's really, really useful. And I think it goes back down. I like the term prioritizing because when we look at the thing, what a lot of people don't do is they don't really think about prioritizing their life. Really, when we talk about diet, I talk about diet management a lot with my clients in the early stages. Of like structure creates freedom. Structure to your meals, structure to your nutrition, structure to your day, so it doesn't get away with you. And the same thing with social occasions. If you've got 3 social occasions in the week, like they're not all the most important thing in the world. But at the same time, I'm not going to tell you on your 20th wedding anniversary to never have a drink and just eat broccoli and steak. So it's like, okay, what is the one way you literally, we need to create a buffer. We need to work around it because this is more important. And what are the ones where you can dial it back in? And like going back into that thing about someone handing you a drink, it goes back in being aware that people consciously or subconsciously will try and sabotage you. And I think being aware of that, like the flashback I got when you mentioned that about the upsetting someone else. And again, I'm long enough in the game of this that I don't really give a shit. But I remember I went on a junk when last year when I was like a week out from my photo shoot. So I was a completely sober junk, which is a really weird experience because you're locked in a boat with 30 very, very, very drunk, singing, happy people that are all going to try and get you to drink. And I'm completely stone cold sober throughout the whole thing. And I've got a relatively good group of friends here in Hong Kong where I don't get many of those comments anymore. And because I was so lean at that point that no one really questioned it. No one's like, oh, I'll go on then, because it was like, it's clear he's doing this for something in particular because he's leaner than the average person going on a diet for a holiday. But I remember this one person I didn't know on the junk, like just like insinuating like, oh, you have to do about 100 push-ups to burn off a drink, wouldn't you? I'm like assuming that's all I do. All I do is do push-ups all day, every day. And like, I laughed at it, but I sat there and thought, if I didn't know this, if I wasn't aware of what people's subconscious do and what the comments make, I would immediately feel that I am now labeled as different to everybody else and think that necessarily that may be a bad thing. And that might have been the moment I caved and almost tried to conform to what the rest of the people were doing. Like, no, I'm not just this horrible connotation of like a gym bro of not really caring about anything else, just cares about training and chicken and broccoli, which is far from true because I love a drink when I'm not dieting.
No, exactly that. The word I picked up on there is just being aware, right? So like, again, if these kind of situations come about a lot, like with one of my clients, I'll talk to them about essentially triggers, right? What are the triggers that make you then overeat or overdrink? And understanding a little bit of the psychology behind it just helps to then, the better you understand it, the better you can then make an informed decision. Oh, okay, I get why I do this. Now I know how that works. I can kind of break the chain. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Like I know that, I always end up overeating because I'm afraid of upsetting someone else. But then by making them happy, I then upset myself. And you're kind of subconsciously telling that person that their happiness is more important than my own.
Yeah.
And you also encourage that behavior every time you do it.
It also reinforces your psyche. I always look at, I always use the term of taking a risk, but it's the same sort of analogy. Like if you everyone talks about the risks of making a change, doing something that's different. But no one tells you about the downsides of not making it. Everyone talks about not making that change as playing it safe. I don't think it is, because like you look in that example, every time you might go, oh well, it's only a bit of extra food, and I'm trying to make that person happy. But every time you're telling yourself that your happiness is as important as them. And when we look at the mental aspect of this, it's more to it than just a 12-week transformation. Is imagine if every time you did that, you're telling yourself, I'm not as important as everyone else around me. What's that going to do to your self-esteem on everything, not even just dieting?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Every time you do that, like I said, you reinforce the behavior. And something I also say to clients in that situation, the first few times it's always a bit difficult, right? Like, the first few times that you turn a drink down when, all your mates know you never turn a drink down. That's not you, right? That's not who you are as a person. But all of a sudden you started turning drinks down. Like, who is this guy, right? Yeah. But after the first few times you do it and people start to understand, like, oh, actually, he's fucking got a pair of balls. Or a girl, whatever. Like he's turning it down. They actually respect you a bit more for it. And then eventually they actually stop, like, constantly shoving drinks in your face or constantly shoving food in your face. They offer it and then you say no, then they stop. That's it.
Yeah. And the good people in your life will eventually change that tone, right? They're just acting by the way they've always acted with you based on the person, the values you had prior to this day. As your values change, people are maybe that you might find that aren't as important to you, I haven't got your back as much as you think, will drift by the wayside. But the people who are generally your friends and people are, your close network, will just change the way they behave. That you're the important, whether you not well, you need 10 drinks to be Steve. I think that's a really thing for the people to be massively aware of. I mean, going into that, because obviously we talked about empathy here with you coming from a finance background, and we talked about potentially eating more based off what other people deem is necessary from you or the way you are. I mean, have you ever had any challenges coming from an Indian background? Because that's normally a bigger feeding environment where people try and impress their mum, their grandmothers, and etc.
Yeah, a little bit. I think especially so going back about 10 years, when I started to, I'd say, cut down on eating my mum's food. So back when I was living with my parents and like start making my own food, I did feel like I was upsetting her a little bit. So like I understood that like your mum always wants to feed you, right? Especially when you're living under their roof. But I was doing my own thing and I was super focused. Like I said before, my life back then was like food prep, gym and work. So I was just super focused on like what I was doing, and I'd kind of like just kind of ignore the fact that I was probably upsetting her a little bit. And then like when it comes to more like family gatherings where there's more people around, I would then like I was in a good place where I could relax a little bit because it was an occasional thing. It wasn't like an every day or every week kind of thing. And I could still control like how much I was eating of stuff that was off plan. Because at the time, like I wouldn't have had like a specific short-term goal. It's not like I was like prepping for a photo shoot or anything like that. If I was, then maybe that would have been a little bit different. But there are definitely challenges, like us living in Hong Kong and in Chinese culture or in Indian culture. It's definitely a lot more food involved. I think.
I also think it's an amount in Hong Kong food. It's what I find it's a whole mess of crap. Like when you look at like English food is very easy to go to a restaurant that serves Western food.
Oh yeah, that's what I say when clients are eating out. You go like I'm like, ideally, please don't go to a Thai or a Chinese or an Indian. Like go to a Western restaurant.
Yeah, Indian's not too bad because you can get like chicken tikka and you
get tandoori, right?
Yeah, but I find with like a lot of these foods, like with Western foods, it's very much your meat and two veg for the most part. But then when you go, I get these things sent to me in my food pictures from clients. I'm just like, where do I even start? What on earth is this? Why can I see my reflection in this meal? Yeah. And why have you put it in your food diary? I get this a lot as well. I don't know if you get it with local Hong Kong clients, where I get it, it's easier for them, but they'll put it in their language. They'll put it in Chinese text. Yeah, and I'll get like, help me help you. But like, yeah, I think that's it. So with that, I mean, like, obviously there's an important thing when we're looking at people that maybe listen to this in Hong Kong. What guidance do you give because people don't really have kitchens here, they don't really cook. So what guidance do you give to those guys about how to manage their diet?
I've got two things here, right? One is kind of learning what foods have protein, carbs, and fats in it, right? So I use like lists of foods that have those three nutrients, and then a little bit more detail in terms of like portions. So how much does 100 grams of how much protein does 100 grams of chicken have versus how much protein does 100 grams of rice have, for example, right? Understanding that stuff when they're doing their own food. But when it comes to eating out, I'm like, I still use the old precision nutrition hand stuff, right? So palm-sized portion of protein, cup full of rice, fist full of vegetables, and like thumb of fat. I'm like, okay, you understand now which foods have protein, carbs, fats, and like which foods have fiber, right? So whether you're eating in or eating out, you're still following that same structure. So what I want you to do is learn, like in whatever cuisine you're eating, like what foods are like fat, where do you get fat from? Where do you get protein from? Where do you get carbs from? And then just put your meal together as you please, right? A little bit obviously more flexible when you're eating out, like understand portions and stuff, understand which things are going to be, typically when meals out are always higher in fat than we want it, right? I don't, people always worry about carbs, but it's not really carbs, especially if you do go for like an Asian cuisine. Tends to be like oily and stuff, so you're never going to be too low on fats. But as long as people are aware and understand, like, okay, oils have fat in it, right? Reminds me of a client back in London I had who, I remember the first 3 weeks, like body fat wasn't shifting at all, weight wasn't shifting. I'm like, there's got to be something wrong, like something I'm not seeing in his food logs or something. I'm like, are you using any oil in stuff that you're eating out? So, oh yeah, I love oil. I'm like, how much oil are you using in your meals? Like, I'm like, are you using like a teaspoon or a tablespoon? It's like more about a cup. He's like, drizzle oil all over his food. I'm like, Okay, yeah. So oil actually does have calories in it.
I remember two instances like that. Well, three that really stood out. One's not so bad. Like one guy I had who says something like 700 grams of protein, one meal, boom. He messaged me. He sent me this picture.
I think I saw it come up in the Muscle Nerds video.
Yeah. So he me and my crazy lockdown beard. 700 grams of protein. I was like, one, it's the amount of protein in the chicken, not the weight of the chicken. And two, you've weighed the plate. So you just put 700, like put chicken on a plate, put it on the scale. It was all 700 grams. The assumed it was all like that was it. But I also had someone who was really frustrated. He wasn't losing. And I was like trying to work out what it was. And I was like, hey man, there's some sauce in that food picture. How do you track that? He goes, oh, I'm not going to track my sauce. He was down 1,000 calories of sauce alone a day.
Jeez, what kind of sauce?
I was like tomatoey, like, yeah, because he could try to make things more palatable, particularly vegetables. Yeah. And the other one I had was not a fat loss one. I had this client that just couldn't sleep and she was tired, really struggling with sleep. And I went, have you got any caffeine that you're having late at night? No, not anything. Because any coffees? No. Because what are you drinking? Oh, just water. And then a week later goes, oh, but I'm having a bit of green tea. I'm like, how much is a bit of green tea? And she was like, multiple litres of green tea a day because she thought it was a fat loss thing. Like it's a fat loss effort. I was like, there's still caffeine in that, you know. And she cut that out immediately, had a good night's sleep. I'm like, yeah, you were drinking like 11 o'clock at night, 1.5 litres of like green tea.
Well, just like in a massive canister.
Just watered it down and just down the hatch.
Yeah, that's gross.
So going into like those things, because like a lot of frustrations with fat loss are overestimations. It's making mistakes with things, or it's guilt. It's all of the mentality, or again, like we spoke about earlier, of I don't want to admit that I've had that food. How do you encourage good communication with your clients so they don't feel bad about communicating things to you? Because we've established that people can sort of eat what they want, and it's about learning about these habits and understanding expectations. That only works if someone comes to you with what's going on, the true picture. So how do you encourage that sort of thing?
That is hugely important. Like, it's essentially my responsibility, or the trainer's responsibility, to make a client feel comfortable to be honest about their food, right? Even any slip-ups. And I think from a trainer's perspective, it's really important that we don't just bollock someone for, going a little bit off plan. You got to make people feel comfortable about being honest with their food. Again, another thing that I say to clients at the start of the whole journey is that this is a vulnerable process. And in order for you to really get the most out of it, you got to allow yourself to be vulnerable, right? Like, the whole thing of, first of all, wanting to get in shape is to admit that you're not currently in shape. You're not happy with how you look, right? Which admitting that to someone who, especially if you're just an online coach and you don't meet the person in face to face, like you have to admit to them the things you don't like about yourself. It's quite a vulnerable process. Then you're also admitting, as a client, you're admitting like all the things that you perhaps eat or drink, or like what time you go to sleep, like the things that we would deem unhealthy to someone who maybe you consider the epitome of health, right? Someone who goes to sleep at 10 p.m. every night, someone who eats like quote unquote clean food. I hate that phrase, but that's what people say, right? So it's a vulnerable process. And as a trainer, you've got to make people feel comfortable for them to communicate that with you, with the expectation that you're going to help them. You're not going to like bollock them. I've genuinely had clients who would tell me that, I ate too much on Saturday. And then I'd be like, okay, well, you did really well in in the 6 days before that. 5 days before that, Saturday, Monday to Friday. And overall, like your weight's still down if they're working on weight loss. So you ate a little bit more on Saturday, it's okay, it's fine. And I've literally had clients tell me that, oh my God, I thought you were going to like bollock me. Yeah. Like, no, different, right? It's different if like someone's doing that week on week and then you're helping someone like trying to overcome whatever slip-ups happen like in previous weeks. But if they keep repeating the same thing, then you kind of have to like call someone out on their bullshit a little bit, right? But you have to, like, on the onset, you have to build a good relationship with someone just to make them feel comfortable to communicate that and be honest with you. I actually remember thinking about this now. a little while ago, I remember seeing someone I know in Hong Kong. He's walking down the street with a McDonald's in his hand, walking back from work, right, like 5 p.m. I was like, "Oh, you got what's that? Your dinner?" He's like, "No, it's from my missus. She's on a diet right now, and she's struggling." And so she'd asked him to grab her a McDonald's on the way home, and obviously, I actually know the trainer at the time who was training her, but it wasn't communicated to the trainer. Obviously, I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
But I just found that interesting that obviously the client would have felt the need to sneak in a McDonald's on a Friday night. Obviously, there was some kind of miscommunication there, and there probably would have been a relationship where that person felt comfortable to then tell the trainer, right?
Yeah.
So it's an important point you brought up.
I think that's really important. I think when you spoke about saying something to a person that's deemed the epitome of health, where these are things as well, these are habits that these people probably aren't very proud of having. We all have coping mechanisms. And some of these things, like it's often a very vulnerable, I should say vulnerable is a great word, vulnerable place to say, like, I go to eat when I'm stressed or when I'm sad or when I'm lonely. And I don't want you to take away my coping mechanism. And even like as hard as, sometimes it's a thing that needs to change. Sometimes it's a thing that is a change in the expectation and be able to say, you don't have to get rid of that entirely. It's just creating a better relationship with it. But it's that thing where they might not want to tell you their 3 a.m. cookie binges because this is down to something much, much deeper and potentially out of our remit. But it's creating that conversation where it's like, you know what, it's okay, I don't judge. Like, we all go through things, and I've opened with my emotional connections with food, especially in the last year, and I kicked that a little bit when I started dieting. But it's having those conversations, and there will be mistakes, but I think that's such an important point to cover, because I think it really does make or break a coaching process, and it's much harder online as well because people can just disappear.
Yeah, it is also partly why I prefer the one-on-one, because it is a little bit easier to build that rapport, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, like, everyone, me included, we all have coping mechanisms for different situations. And I think as a trainer, you can't just completely disregard someone's coping mechanism. It might be then worth talking about, well, what are you actually trying to cope with?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is it, like, I have a super stressful job and I work really long hours, and at the end of the day, like, I like to have a drink. I'm like, okay, well, well, maybe a drink is fine, but maybe if it's like 3 or 4, then like it's not going to help you to lose weight. Yes. So, okay, understanding, okay, what is that person trying to cope with? Stressful job. And then maybe trying to find other ways. Again, this is another conversation I actually had with another online client probably a few weeks ago. Trying to find other ways to cope with that, right? Because they can't just not cope with it, then that will end up in a worse situation. So finding another way to cope with the stress of your long hours job, right? Like, maybe if you want to blow off some steam, instead of having a few drinks, like, go for a walk. Like, whatever it is for someone, It might be go for a walk, it might be watch a TV show, listen to music, play with your kids, like something else, right? But just trying to kind of work it out yourself, or for that person, like, okay, well, understand your triggers, like we were saying before. Like, what is the thing that you're trying to cope with, and how are you feeling at the time? Like, I'm really stressed, and then what else can you do to cope with that situation? How can you change the coping mechanism?
Yeah.
Is then, I think, helpful for that, again, the long-term progression of someone from losing weight and being able to keep it off in the long term. Whereas, like, if someone just takes that short-term view without the long-term view of, okay, I eat a whole packet of biscuits when I'm stressed. Okay, we'll cut the packet of biscuits. Okay, they lose weight. They do that for about 12 weeks. But then they're still stressed after the 12 weeks, and then they end up having 2 packets of biscuits.
Yeah.
And they're stressed afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And often those things it's a compounding effect, right? Where someone now has the stress that made them have the packet of biscuits, also combined with, I have failed on my diet, which now adds the second packet of biscuits.
Yeah, then it kind of spirals, and it definitely gets a lot worse than how it started.
Yeah, exactly. Cool, man. So I mean, it's been awesome chatting to you. We'll wrap this down, but I'll definitely get you on to talk about, because what I love about this is we didn't get onto the topic that we were actually planning to discuss whatsoever, but I actually think it's been better. So that's been really, really useful. So for anybody who wants to know where to find you and find more about what you do, where can people find you?
Really, Instagram is the best place. So AJAY_PT_. Or I do have my website, which is ap-personaltraining.com. But usually Instagram is the most.
And as you are proudly a one-to-one personal trainer, obviously we've got in you're in a world where there's lockdown outside sessions maybe now, but how can people work with you here? Where do you work in Hong Kong, and what are you doing now with gyms being closed?
With gyms closed, I currently actually have a setup in my apartment, which has been handy. So I'm currently doing sessions in here. I do some like Zoom sessions with a couple of clients who can't make it in. But yeah, definitely missing the gym now, 2.5 months in.
Yeah, mate, you me both. And when the gyms do open, how do they find you? Which gyms are you training? Obviously, I know this. But...
I freelance in Central in Hong Kong in a gym gym you work at here. So yeah, either walk into the gym, find me, which I think one person did. Otherwise, yeah, Instagram or the website's the best way to contact me.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cool. Thanks for having me on.
No worries.